The Art and Science of Wealth podcast, having an impact, leaving a legacy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art and Science of Wealth podcast. I'm Steffi Baker, and my co-host is here, Joe Milam. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Steffi.
Are we ready?
Is a treat.
Rock and roll. This is our first one. We're so excited.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a treat. It's going to be organic. It's going to be terribly authentic in our complete lack of professionalism and any agenda other than just to have some interesting conversations around the things that you and I have a reasonable amount of experience on, and just want to share with folks that want to learn more about the art and science of wealth.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a big topic. So
yes, it is.
If we share why we're doing this and what it's going to be all about.
Yeah, I think for our audience's sake, at least when I ever listen to podcasts, I always go in first wanting to understand why they're doing it, because I need context as to what I'm likely to learn and what's the authenticity of the content of what that I'm going to learn from. And so I think it's important, at least for me, and I think for us to really embrace that right up front here as we're getting our first one in the books or in the can or whatever the right phrase is. And but also for our whatever audience we do attract, so they can go back to it and really understand the context of our why, because I think that's really important. Would you like to go? You want me to go?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, to back it all the way up, you and I connected. Jen, I saw you making a comment on a mutual friend's post, and I said, that's really interesting. And I think I sent you an invitation and said, I'd love to hear more about who you are and what you're doing. And that's how we got together probably earlier this year. And as we had a few Zoom chats, it was obvious that we had a lot in common, but also being different people entirely, we have different viewpoints. And we found that it was fun for us to debate a bit.
Yeah, I agree. It's very few people I have found throughout my career, and we will get to some of those detailed bios things. But there's been very few people I've encountered throughout my career. I'm 60 years of age and been in the financial world since college, really. So it's something that's I've been involved with, interested in, and really a student of since college. But very few people I have found have really understood the importance of the psychology of wealth. I think what is captured in that word art.
Yes.
There's so much emphasis on the tacticians or the financial side, the science, if you will. If we can put it in the left brain, right brain. But the wealthier the person, the more mature the wealth is the phrase I always assigned it. The more the art became the more important factor that impacted their peace of mind, their satisfaction with their status, or their interest in doing something with their excess resources. And so very few people have understood that, and you're one of the small handful. And so I picked up on that right away. And then I remember the way I've shared it with my colleagues and friends is that, after a fairly short period of time on the phone, you and I could finish each other's sentences in our observations and even some of our experiences around this topic, around this subject matter. And so that to me is really that's my why is I've had people say you should write a book about this. And I have done some recorded educational presentations. And I think we both saw that we're both come at this from a professorial educator perspective, not a salesperson, but somebody that we literally want others to grasp this information for their own benefit, and to use it as thoroughly as they can. So this is an effort, at least for me, to capture with a like-minded person, both from a philosophy standpoint and certainly from a professional insight, the importance of and some of the nuances of the art and science of wealth. So it's really important to me get that down, capture it, share it with those, because there is so much noise in the system right now, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. In the phrase family office has become very fashionable now, and even that definition's gotten so bloody diluted. So
no one knows what it means.
nobody knows what it means. So it's in a more simplistic terms, there needs to be more signal and less noise around these two topics of the art and science of wealth. And so
Mhm.
I've been never wanted to do a podcast on my own because that was just not something that resonated for me. I wanted to always do it with somebody else, so it wasn't just about me or my knowledge or my opinions. It was the collective wisdom that could be done with somebody else with a shared perspective, but a diverse background and a diverse approach to the same insights. And obviously, we just found each other very organically.
Yes, the figure skater and the fly fisherman.
Hey, that's almost a bad television show.
It sounds like, yeah, it's like BJ and the Bear or something.
Exactly.
I'm dating myself badly.
What came to mind to me too.
Yeah, okay.
BJ the
Funny.
Bear. My
Well,
initials are actually BJ.
there you go. I guess I get to be the bear then.
You're the bear.
Cool. Yeah, we both come at it very differently. And the phrase I picked up on, I'm sure I'm not the first person in the world to say the art and science of wealth, but I am the person that trademarked it in the United States. Because the more that I poked around the family office world, and I've been in it for over a dozen years, and grew up in Milwaukee, and I had the great privilege of attending a private high school on a scholarship, and it was typically the old money of Milwaukee. And so I learned at a young age and saw at a young age what, people who don't understand wealth, they see, oh, those other people. No, they're not the other people, they're people too. But I learned the issues and saw firsthand what went on. And then as I got older and kind of fell into the family office industry accidentally, as pretty much everyone does, when I was living in London in business school, I started to see that, the money's one thing, and that's the science, that's the hard knowledge of investments. And I had the great privilege of my first job in the business being able to go to manager presentations of all kinds. I learned about convertible bonds and everything under the sun, you name it. And I just sat there and listened. Since I was a child, I've been a great reader. I'm very curious. I still am very curious. I always wanted to know why, or tell me more about that or something. And that was encouraged for me when I was in high school. My favorite story that I like to tell, and I'll tell the condensed version, is I was at one of my friends' houses studying for a history test, and her father came home. He happened to be the CEO of a household name company. The workers were striking. I read the papers at age 17, and there's all this, this is awful, and they won't give the workers more money. And it was quite a bit of money, I think, that they wanted, especially back in the day. And so he came home, and I said, "Oh, hello, girls. What are you doing?" We were studying. And I said, "Could I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure." And I asked respectfully. I did not attack. I said, "Well, why won't you give the workers more money? Why won't you give them what they're asking for?" He sat down and explained it to me. Took 5 minutes. His wife held dinner. And I was, wow. So I learned, if I can ask anybody anything, I've gotten a rap on the knuckles a couple of times because people didn't like that they were being questioned, albeit politely. But generally in my life, if you want to know, go ask. I'll go ask. It's probably one of my superpowers. I'm fearless. I will just go ask. And wow, that's interesting. And he explained to me about the price of steel and how you had to pay workers here, and there was going to be so much less to pay workers elsewhere. And I got a real education in economics. Quickly. So I just saw it differently. And there's the money side, and then there's your life side, and the whole life stuff. People seem to think that being wealthy is a panacea for everything. If you've got money, you've got a different set of issues. Are you going to worry about the mortgage? No, but you have a whole other set of issues that are just as challenging. And you have to work both sides of this, the art and the science. Otherwise, you could be a very wealthy person who's very unhappy, unfulfilled, all kinds of things. I think of, like, for example, the Getty family, the Getty oil. Oh my goodness. If you look at the history of that family, so many tragic events and difficult events. So it does not equal happiness. It does not equal success. And you've got to look at that side. What does this money mean in your life? And then you've got to also really understand the money. And the more I've learned, the more fascinated I've got with the investment opportunities and what the wealthy do that the middle class don't. If you look at a breakdown of how family offices invest an average portfolio, there's the story of why they're wealthy and why other people are middle class or not even. So it's just endlessly fascinating to me how people get wealthy, how they get wealthy other than money and stay wealthy, because there are many kinds of wealth. And this just interests me. So talking with you and finding another kindred spirit of let's poke into this and, well, what is legacy? And, well, do families really lose their wealth in 3 generations? Is that even true? I've seen something that debunks that. There are so many commonly held ideas that I think that we can challenge, and we can bring. We're going to once a month talk together about a topic, and then once a month we'll bring on a guest, and that'll be really fun.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Well,
Yeah.
your journey is and that's what I think is going to make this so much fun, because your journey is exactly the opposite of mine. I didn't have the great good fortune you did to be thrust into that culture of wealth as you did through the private school. I came from an alcoholic father, broken home. As I like to somewhat heavy-handed say, my father was born into middle class, and he aspired to be white trash, and he was largely successful. Now that's a somewhat angry son's interpretation of his father's choices and motivations, but on the surface, it wasn't hard to see the parallels to that. And so I was always the wannabe. I saw these people, and I had some friends that came from what appeared to be wealth, and they had memberships to the country clubs and all those sorts of things. And I always felt like a metaphorical person with their nose pressed against the window, looking in with envy and longing. But I started early on in college finding out that I had a certain level of natural skills and certainly an intellectual interest in investing. So I started early in studying it, always with the aspiration to wanting to make something of myself. And my naive perception was that wealth was evidence that you actually made something of yourself, and in college, I had I read a piece that opened my eyes to the importance of the art of wealth. The psychology is, why does wealth stay in European families through more generations than American families? And the article itself unpacked some of those things based on some studies and the like. But what it most importantly did was introduce me to the dynamics. It's not as simple as what a lot of people think it is, and what I thought it was. And then right out of college, I was able to jump off into the financial world in what's called the sell side, a brokerage firm, one of the old firms, E.F. Hutton, that some folks of our generation remembers. Yeah.
I remember the commercial.
Oh yeah. Anybody north of 50 remembers a commercial. Under 50 doesn't know who E.F. Hutton is. But and that was the great gift of that 5 years I spent with Hutton was I learned personally that money didn't motivate me. Huge, powerful lesson. And that's what allowed me to continually pursue this qualitative art of wealth, while I also was very much a scientist, technician, money manager, securities analyst, and eventually running a multifamily office. So it was like I said, I think that's what's so fun about our respective backgrounds and both diverse paths to get to this point. But we still come to the same conclusions, and we share the same level of observations and insights from these two unique paths. And I think that's what makes some of the content we'll be able to capture through this medium, I think, particularly objectively accurate and objectively valuable to those folks that really do want to maybe challenge their own perceptions, their own maybe family backgrounds or interpretations of wealth, and some of the other things that get in the way of people's accurate perceptions and maybe empathy with the people of money, as opposed to resentment or envy.
Yeah.
Because I having managed money for some old money families,
No.
the vulnerabilities and there's I see what happens oftentimes to their children, and we'll get into this, but I was very, again, blessed to realize I have zero envy for people with wealth. A, because money didn't motivate me, but B, when you get close and personal to them and they become open and vulnerable for you, you realize, holy cow, I wouldn't want to be subject to those emotions, nor would I want my kids to be subject to that environment that oftentimes can lead to bad outcomes with children of wealth. Doesn't have to.
No.
But
it's isolating. That's what people don't realize. You can't just go talk about the issues that you're having. You either get a stony, icy silence or get that must be nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's I mean, we do come from, I'm excited about our backgrounds and a different experience, because for beyond my blonde hair, underneath the blonde hair, that's because I look better in gold than silver, and I'm not ready to go silver yet.
There you go.
My dad is black and my mother is white, and that was a
Wow.
real interesting thing to be growing up in Milwaukee in the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
And I look the way I do because my father was from Louisiana. So for the people that don't understand Louisiana, everyone's mixed there anyway.
Yeah.
I know that my great-great-grandfather on his side was, I believe, according to family legend, a white man from Ireland originally.
There you go.
And then on my mom's side, I recently discovered that my grandfather was straight out of Norway. So I get all kinds of people look at me and go, "Where are you from? And what are you?" And I used to get, "Are you Swedish?" I'm like, "Are you out of your mind?" I get everything.
Yeah.
And so as I'm now a woman of a certain age, and I'm biracial, and I've seen, I've lived having a foot in the white world and a foot in the black world. And it's kind of sad to me. It's like watching all my cousins fight. And ironically, I don't think the white folks say the same stuff about the black folks. The black folks say the same stuff. Like, you all are just talking the same.
Just people.
And we get over it.
Yeah. Just
so I don't talk in public a lot about race, because the first thing I'm not white enough for some folks, and I'm not black enough for other folks. And the first thing will be, what do you know? Look at you. You pass. And I call it the P word, because I'm like, get over yourselves. Listen to me and live in my world for a little while, and I don't pass for squat. Okay. Right. People look at me, oh, there's something about you. I was in Africa, in Malawi, with a group. I volunteered. I lived in London for 12 years. I volunteered with a microloan foundation. We went to Malawi to look at the field operations, and there's me and 6 other British people, and we're going village to village, and we roll up with our interpreter, and in almost every village, like, well, what about her? Where is she? Well, this is a group from Britain. They're like, well, what about her? Where's she from? She's American. No, where is she from? The Africans in Africa couldn't figure me out. So I just have such unique perspective, being, but most biracial kids look more black. And I also grew up more white. I grew up in a very white suburb of Milwaukee, and I did not understand until not too long ago how I think Milwaukee may be the most racially divided city in America. It's very possible.
Divided or diverse?
Divided.
No kidding. Holy cow.
In the white folks live here, the black folks live there, the few Hispanics live over there. You might have a few Asians mixed in, or whoever else, a Native American, whatever. But yeah, it was interesting. So I come to this with the experience, though, of again, going to high school. I went there, frankly, because I got, it's called bullying today, but my sisters and I had a hard time. Because everyone in the village we lived in knew who our parents were. And at we go out to the mall or whatever, people would openly stare, because a biracial family was,
right,
really unusual.
It was a big deal back then.
Yeah, it was a very big deal. And I got tired of the bullying, so I decided I wanted to apply to this. My mom said, you should go to this school. Okay.
Okay.
I start calling 411. Can I have a number for University School of Milwaukee? And I did the whole thing. And
Wow.
I got out, and I got to tell you, that was kind of a sanctuary for me of
Sure.
nobody cared about who my parents were, what money we had. No one cared about the color of my skin. I've never felt so accepted in my life. And I had all the privileges. I was invited to be in service club. I could have been a Deb if I wanted to be. My father was very sick with Parkinson's when I was in high school, and I didn't want to do it. But what I learned there was I was perfectly acceptable. I could go wherever and ask. No one was standing at the door going, "You can't come in here because of your skin color or your gender."
Right.
So I've learned just go. You want to go. I go to a lot of family office conferences. Nobody's standing around. Who are you?
Right.
So a lot of it is how cool are you with you? But yeah, so I see things. I sit in the rooms with, in my earlier high tech career, good Lord, I lived in Silicon Valley when the ratio of men to women was 8 to 1. It was ridiculous. So I'm used to being the unusual one, but I'm just busy being me. And that's what I learned from my parents. They use their silver bullets very carefully, picking, when we had to stand up about race stuff, we did, but mainly just keep on trucking. There's ignorant people all the time. So I see things, there's a lot of white males, but ladies, anyone else, jump in. It's 2022. Go for it. That's my message. Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the things we wanted to do in this first one is as we're sort of getting our sea legs, because I've never done a podcast. I've been guests like you probably have, and I've done a reasonable amount of public speaking where I controlled all the agenda to an audience that was there to hear me speak. But that's not why we're doing this. And I think it's important to put down on sort of and memorialize what we don't want this to be.
Yes.
I think that we want it to be organic and free form. And again, I always go back to the Rogan role model. I think that the brilliance of what he did is he went in with no agenda. He was just curious. And that's really, that authenticity is really, I think, what we hope to aspire to or hope to accomplish here, because we're both curious about each other's backgrounds and each other's insights. But also the people we're going to have is going to be fun. As we both know, we've got a real rich list of
we know cool people. Yeah,
that will really elevate this conversation, the topic itself, and bring again, I think some much more legitimate insights than what is popularly discussed and emphasized in. Because you're probably like me. I think you're probably consuming. I'm always looking for somebody else that's got something new that I don't know about this topic. But it's really hard to wade through those other family office or wealth management or whatever it is that isn't busy selling something, that they're end of the day, they're still trying to create an audience to eventually sell something to. Right. And that's one thing I just personally want to go on record. And I know you feel the same way, that we're not here to sell anything. We both have our own economic agendas, in the sense that we both are still productive, thankfully. And I don't ever want to retire from being economically productive and adding value to an audience I think I might be able to add value to, and maybe they pay me for it. But we're not here selling anything. We're not here. Steffi and I have talked about, even if we do create an audience where sponsors or advertisement might approach us, we're going to be highly selective if we allow sponsorship at all, because we're not doing it for the money, we're not doing it for the sponsorship, nor are we doing it to sell anything. It truly is to share some very unique life journeys and insights and observations that we both had, and we are coming to some very similar observations. And there are some other people out there that we'll both be able to draw from to effectively reinforce the very things you and I, our observations as well. Some of the experts in the field that we have access to will be drawing in as our guests to have their echo some of the same observations, add to some of the insights, but from their unique journey and exposure to the subject matter itself. And so, yes, we will be talking about a whole myriad of topics in and around wealth, in and around money. And as what I've talked about sort of some of the insights and what I would glean to be my level of, I hate to use expert, but for lack of a better label, expertise, is I've studied why people write checks.
Oh,
And I'm not talking about wealthy people, not the run-of-the-mill consumer like I was raised, but wealthy people,
yeah.
which includes philanthropy. Why do people give money to nonprofits? Well, Paul Shervish is the recognized academic expert on that for 20 plus years. I spoke to him many years ago. He subsequently retired, but he's identified 9 different psychographic motivations to why people give money to charity.
Ooh.
Now that in and of itself can be 3 of these podcasts.
At least. Yeah.
It's just so that's the level of insight that we're going to capture, memorialize, and record for this, and just give it to the folks out there to help them, whether you aspire to service the wealth, whether, God forbid, you're lucky enough to be born into wealth, and maybe are thinking of assimiling or being part of the family office, if you will, or at least are maybe in a position to inherit a substantial amount of money, and you want to be better at how you deal with your wealth than maybe you saw your parents or grandparents, because that next generation does have different value systems, but they're still influenced and impacted by some of the same societal pressures, observations, and some of the things that you've experienced firsthand. And like I said, I always thought of myself as that kid outside looking in, until I did get invited inside by one of the most important people in my life, my predecessor. So anyway, I think that's important for us to just get that out front, is what this is not going to be.
No. Yeah, that's very true. And you've just also highlighted yet another great difference between us. I know who Joe Rogan is vaguely. I've never heard his, I've never listened, not because I have an objection to him. I just never kind of gotten around to it, but I do know who he is. There was some controversy last year, right? About they wanted to throw him off Spotify. What did he do? I don't even remember.
Well, this is
tangent. Sidebar.
That whole experience is very much, I think, a wonderful reflection on an anecdotal data point to some of the real challenges our culture has right now. And I'm speaking obviously to American culture, but you could probably extrapolate to Western culture, more broadly defined. But this is a guy who is literally disrupting the control over the public narrative that the mainstream media has enjoyed. And largely has been captured by economic interests, corporate interests, lobbying interests. It's called regulatory capture, where most people don't realize. But I just heard the statistic the other day, and I think it was on Rogan, that 75% of all advertising spend, all the dollars spent advertising on cable news, television shows, it comes from pharmaceutical companies. 75% of all the money spent in advertising. And if you've ever watched a television show, you see how many of these silly health, medical or healthcare or pharmaceutical drug advertisements is virtually on every single show. And it's staggering, but I didn't realize the number was that high.
It doesn't surprise.
And the chairman of Pfizer is also on the board of directors of either Warner Media or one of these big companies, because he's their biggest customer. What might that lead to? Do you think there's some maybe and potential conflicts of interest? And Rogan has disrupted that because he doesn't have an agenda. He's not captured, and most importantly, he's not afraid to. And the word is to have heterodox thinkers on his podcast. Now,
new word.
I know. I had to look it up, believe me. Heterodox is the opposite of orthodox.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Diverse thinkers.
I want to spell it. I'm like, how do you even say it?
Yeah. Nick, you're going to have to write that one down and look up the definition for us and put it in the chat. By the way, I think now is a great time to talk about our producer here, the one that's pulled these pieces together. Nick, yes, Nicholas. We call him Saint Nick so far. Nicholas, Nick, why don't you give it a little bit of your introduction? How did you end up having this dumped in your lap to try and herd these 2 cats called Joe and Steffi?
Yeah, I think,
or BJ. We'll call BJ and the Baker. How's that?
Great.
Yeah, so I mean, I come from completely different background from the both of you guys. So I was born and raised in California. I come kind of like Joe from broken family. but decided to teach myself how to play football to get myself out of my situation. Played football I started my freshman year in high school, became a pretty good recruit, decided to lose weight, lost over 125 pounds, taught myself how to long snap, and got myself a full ride scholarship in Iowa. Just finished out there, and then I work now for Joe's my colleague at our current at Angel Span, and I come from a media background. I have media journalism. I've done everything under the sun when it comes to that, so that's my background in general. And Joe brought this into my life. He's like, "You want to do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no question. This is what I love to do." So it's kind of where I come from, and yeah.
Yeah, turns out Nick's a communications major in college, was a radio broadcaster, did the play-by-play for the basketball team, the college basketball team. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I've done pretty much every sport except my own play-by-play. I've had my own podcast. I've freelanced, edited podcasts. I've done everything under the sun when it comes to media. So,
but have you commentated figure skating?
I have not done that, but I would love to, because I love commentating my favorite sports to commentate is women's sports. I love women's sports. I love women's sports. So it would be awesome to do women's figure skating in the Olympics or something like that. That would be so cool.
Okay. Wait, see, so this is a wonderful Venn diagram almost. We'll call this a Zoom diagram. You love women's sports. You are women. I love women. Just saying. Thought I'd get that out there right up front.
It's all good. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Nick. It is
Nick
fun because
Nick will be. We have let Nick know to jump in, or we may say, Nick, what do you think, or please speak up or ask a question, because you've got Joe is Boomer, I'm Gen X, and we're still trying to figure out what gender. We think you're Z.
We think Z, 21-year-old wide-eyed and figuring out the world. But,
from the eyes of someone just coming up, because my 21st birthday is a distant memory. But you saw the world different, and at that age, and everything was open in front of you. It was a long road ahead, and we're a little further down the road. So we want to absolutely include Nick's perspective. So you'll see.
Well, and thanks for pulling this together, because when Steffi and I started talking about wanting to do this together, we said, okay, Christ, and we don't want to be media property folks. We don't want to have to put the effort into this. We just want to have a convenient way to capture our shared experiences and insights and unlock some of those same insights from our Rolodexes. That's really why we're doing this, because we do know we have some unique experiences and unique insights, and there's so much noise in this world of art and science of wealth, perpetuated by the bad media and the corporations that have captured the media and the narrative, the conventional narrative itself, the perverse incentives, whether it's investing in the public markets, and then as Nick and I are involved in the private markets. The narrative there is even worse. And it very much feels like, at least in both of those worlds, public and private investing, or private company investing, that we're at a material inflection point. And there's a lot of changes taking place, both the sheer backdrop of our economy, which we can spend some time on. We have some thoughtful folks in our Rolodexes if folks really want to talk about and have some real meaty interpretations of the state we find ourselves, both economically and financially. What I like to say, I'm a finance nerd, but I'm a Fed nerd. I actually started the Paul Volcker fan club in college. And for those of you who aren't old enough to know, he was probably the single greatest central banker, former chairman of the U.S., our Federal Reserve, but the single greatest central banker in the history of central banks globally. And I actually started the Paul Volcker fan club in college, and actually have his autograph hanging on my wall. It's the only autograph I've ever sought or kept. No, he's passed. Yeah, he's passed. But anyway, so long story short, we can get in the weeds on that stuff if we want. It's not terribly interesting, but to me, but it might be interesting to our audience. And yes, we do have some things to offer there. Both of us do. So again, I think it's really important to get out front why we're doing this, what it's not going to become if we can help it, and we're going to hold Nick accountable to making sure we don't devolve into even our lesser selves and letting this become too much about us individually, but more about what we're trying to capture and memorialize and share with others. And at the end of the day, like I said, if the goal of this is, because of this inflection point, we are at an important point. We're also seeing a massive transfer of wealth from an older generation to a younger generation. And this younger generation has not been served well in understanding both their responsibilities and the responsibilities of wealth that's going to land in their lap, but also their opportunities to be better than their parents or grandparents. We're seeing inklings of it, but they have a huge opportunity. And to the degree in which our personal and professional legacies can be served by helping the next generation be better than we were in our generations and our parents' generations, we would have done something worthwhile here. And I think that's very much part of both my career aspirations, but obviously it informs my interest in this and doing it with you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Stephanie, do you want to talk about, or I know you've started writing down some of the guests that you've got in mind. I have got them in mind, but I haven't been writing them down yet. I've got a circle of them. Is there any you would care to even reference just for the sake of
we're
this
not ready for that, but
Okay.
let's just say that, because I'm still having fun making a list.
It is
After all these years, well, because again, it goes back to high school. I learned you can go ask anyone anything, anyone.
Yeah.
CEO, the custodian, whatever. Everyone's got some interesting experience, life experience, or lessons that we can learn. So there are just so many people that, to me, this is like, oh, good, the candy store just opened. I now have a great reason to contact people I don't know, or contact people I do know. I'm like, hey, we're talking about this. What do you know that you'd love to share? There's so many people, I've already started to see, having gotten into this family office thing by accident in 2007, there's already been a group of people at these certain family offices who have retired.
Yeah.
And
sure.
there is tremendous experience. I can think of a dozen people off the top of my head. I'm like, we need to get some alumni in here and I want to capture their knowledge from what they've seen for so many years of as this nascent business grew in the United States. I mean, like the family office, so to speak, goes back, and the concept goes back to the Knights of Templar. And it'll be interesting also, having lived in London for 12 years, I have a very international perspective. The Americans do things one way, and then there's the rest of the world, and then there's regions, and we want to look at all of this. We don't, I watched some organizations from America try to get a toehold in the rest of the world, and often they'd start in London. It looked like the easiest place to start, because it's sort of the same language. And they could, the rest of the world doesn't necessarily want to hear what the American experience is. They want to hear something about them too, because they operate very, very differently, as we know. So we wanted to talk about, there's just so many people. So I'll bring in the international side for sure. Of let's look at, we're going to look at family office, family business, the wealth, the personal issues, the investment stuff like venture capital, what's going on. That's a whole topic there. So much we can dig into, and so many interesting people to learn from that aren't, because as we know, the most interesting people aren't always the ones being quoted all the time. Sometimes those are the best people. They really are, but I'd say that's 20% of the time. 80% of the time, it's because they're handy, they're convenient, it's easy to get to them. The journalists know their names because they put themselves out there. And I'm not just, hey, publicity is a fact of life. I'm not disparaging anyone. I'm just saying there are a lot of voices that we don't hear from, because a lot of times they don't necessarily want to be mainstream. So
they don't have the aspirations, the ego aspirations, or they're more than comfortable with just, and we'll get to, and maybe the next podcast we'll maybe spend some more time diving into a little bit more detail of our respective backgrounds and experience sets. But one of the gentlemen that was technically a client, he was a trustee of a very prominent estate from a fairly well-known family in Southern California, in LA. But he was a big time attorney with O'Melveny and Myers, and was head of the Riviera Country Club, and he was the quiet conciliaire for the LA wealth of the 60s and 70s and 80s. And was the trustee of one of these families he's guided forever, and of which I manage their money. And a great quote from him His name is Don Meyer, by the way, D-O-N-N-M-E-Y-E-R from O'Melveny. Sorry, Don Miller from O'Melveny and Myers. But he said, look, at the only whales that get harpooned are the ones that surface.
Oh, good one.
What an insight.
However, from what I know of whales, and I know a lot because I studied them in second grade, whales have to surface periodically, but it's where you surf, and you've got to surface, you want to surface somewhere not where everyone is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was a wonderful metaphor for discretion. The older the money, the more discreet it is, the less it even talks about money. One of the families that I had the privilege of being very close to is 3 generations of DuPonts. And that is the oldest money in the United States because it came from France with money recruited by Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin after the French Revolution. They brought their expertise, chemical, mainly in the field of chemistry, gunpowder, and brought their wealth after the French Revolution in 1801 in the United States. And again, old money doesn't talk about money. It doesn't like to surface metaphorically. It's not a subject matter they even care or need to talk about or want people to know they have money.
Well, at the high school I went to, and these are people, a lot of people with wealth for generations. You looked around the school parking lot, the student parking lot. You did not see fancy cars.
Exactly.
You saw very average, nothing special. I remember it was a big deal when in my senior year, one of my friends, her parents went to Europe for a while. She got to drive the Mercedes to school for a week. Big, hairy deal. And in fact, I one time met Peter Buffett, Warren Buffett's son. He used to speak. He played piano. He lived in Milwaukee for a while. Did music, and I caught him in the hall. I said, there's just something about Midwestern wealth. It's just different. He said, yeah, it's because Omaha, Milwaukee, same thing. Just not that impressed. And if you have it, you're not talking about it and you're not flaunting it. And like I remember my friends' moms in high school did not have giant rings, wedding rings. It's not what you do. And then that gets us into, the nouveau riche that, more of that you see on the coasts where, that's a whole other mentality. It's psychology of wealth. This is a whole other topic.
We will get into
Tangent, that. Park that one. Yeah.
We will get into that because it's easy to assign values. Old money is better, nouveau riche is worse. And it's not. It's like not. Going from somebody that's in graduate school versus high school. It's just the experience set and the maturation. But if you're a college student and you go back to a high school party when you're a freshman in college, you go back to a high school party at your old high school. You look at these people at the high school party and think, oh my God, how childish that behavior. And then you become an adult and you go to a college party and go, oh my God, what a childish behavior. And then when you become my youngest daughter, who's the painter of these portraits behind me, these pictures behind me, she is just turning 30. And she was sharing with me, she was in a place over in the east side of Austin here, where she used to enjoy going. She's been here 9 years like me. And she said, oh, Dad, I felt so old. These are all a bunch of 23, 24-year-olds. And all of a sudden I looked at them and I went, oh my God. Then I realized that was me not that long ago.
Yeah.
Right. And it really is just.
It's a stage you pass through.
It's a stage you pass through. But
all right.
What's not inappropriate to judge is somebody that's 30 hanging around at a high school party, right, or a college party. That the behavior and the value systems that does reflect that's something, that metaphorical example says that if you're 30 and still trying to hang around a college party, it doesn't say much about your value system or your level of maturation.
It's a little worrisome.
It's a little worrisome, and that's really, I think, where the judgment is not misplaced or inappropriate. It's like at least it's material information. I don't care how much money you got. If you're still projecting a behavior that would be more consistent with somebody that is not familiar with the benefits of excess resources, that are still acting like nouveau riche, even though that's been in the family for 3 generations, then that's information. And whether that bleeds into judgment or a value system or not, it is important information. Just like that, a number of years ago, there was the book that got so much attention, The Millionaire Next Door.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Right? Nobody knew this person had so damn much money. Well, that was first generation wealth that was extraordinarily mature. They didn't need to care. That was a behavior that was far more consistent with folks where money's been through in that family for multiple generations. Yet that behavior surfaced within first generation wealth. They just cut to the chase of a mature behavior and relationship with their wealth. Versus some wealth is still fairly immature, even after multiple generations.
Right. And that not immature in an insulting way,
No.
just not immature as in just not matured yet. Yeah, you look, athletes and celebrities are great examples. I think I saw something the other day that Shaquille O'Neal said he finally went and got an MBA because he was tired of walking in the room and having them see him as just a dumb jock. And, you know, a lot of the athletes, when they're young, can you imagine being, you know, like Nick's age? Nick, can you imagine having millions of dollars being thrown at you to play, you know, whatever?
He has friends having it happen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's a problem that me and Joe have started kind of looking into too, is because I come from not the best areas, and my friends will get these large contracts and these large money, and family members will come and take it so soon, and things like that nature, things that you don't think of when you get that kind of wealth that run into them. So yeah, I can't imagine it. I wish I could imagine it, but I have seen it with my friends firsthand.
Yeah, it's not pretty. And they make a lot of, unless they get in with some good guidance early on, you know, if they've got their peeps around them that are intimidated or don't understand money or whatever it is, then usually they're going to blow it. And that's part of the learning. You know,
we'll talk about that. I did manage money for some professional athletes and went through some of those experiences, and I'm not going to share their names, but Nick he'll be more modest, but he was a highly recruited high school athlete, and he has friends that went off and are, you know, one of his friends that he played and knows from LA is the last year's Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young. We'll talk about what these high school athletes are now faced with, which is called NIL contracts. They can monetize their name, image, and likeness and actually take money above board to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars as high school athletes getting recruited and by these big universities that have deep-pocketed boosters. And so instead of paying under the table forever, it's now above board under one of the young men we'll probably have as a guest on this down the road is one of the top agents for high school athletes to negotiate NIL contracts as they're being recruited to these universities. So
interesting.
That you talk about new money and immature hands. Holy cow. No, we'll be able to get in the weeds on a bunch of this sort of stuff that'll be interesting for our listeners. But most importantly, I think we'll be able to create a framework on how to interpret some of that behavior in a little bit more objective, a little bit more informed, and maybe even a scientific lens, if you will, as opposed to just, oh, well, that new money that's judged, you know, or these kids are going to blow it. Well, you don't understand the pressures they're under. You don't understand the cultural framework by which they're coming from. Right. And frankly, after I managed money for a couple of athletes, I actually started looking at these professional leagues with a lot more cynical eye. I lost all interest in the NBA. And I have very little interest in the NFL, but the NBA was the worst to me because of what they did with these athletes. And that, you know, you can be one and done at college, or even they can go right from high school, like Kobe Bryant and some of these other athletes went right from high school to the NBA.
Right.
And these are the least prepared people to have that amount of money and celebrity.
Totally.
And enabling bad behavior around them. I looked at these athletes as, believe it or not, victims of a system. Because at the end of the day, what are they? They are the raw material to sell junk food and cars and insurance and cell phone plans. Cryptocurrency. They're literally the raw material. And their lives are just the fodder. And yes, there are structures and systems and tools and resources and advisors that's made available to them. But that is almost like greenwashing, almost like some of the narrative around ESG now. It's like it's the optics versus the substance.
Right.
Yes, we are going to help them help themselves, but at the very nature, there are structural flaws in allowing for people of such unfamiliarity and inexperience with what they're going to be faced with this onslaught of celebrity culture and adulation and wealth and they're literally the outcome's predictable. The outcome is predictable, and yet it's still perpetuated through multiple generations of athletes that get too much money, too much celebrity, and their life is destroyed as soon as that drug of celebrity and wealth is no longer available to them, which is highly predictable given the sport and the average tenure of a professional athlete in each of the individual sports. You could know by mid-20s that person's life is probably or largely destroyed. And so, yeah, I look at some of our sports leagues and think of this through and look at it through a different lens. So again, we're going to have some fun with, again, piercing some of the conventional wisdom, some of the perceptions, some of the what I myself held when I was on the outside looking in and would judge people with wealth or put too much value or aspirational credibility in people with money or too much adulation in professional athletes. These are all just people, all subject to the same challenges that all individuals have, what I'd like to call the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I hope we'll get to also then we'll look at these hidden issues, and then we'll also leave people with thoughts of here's the way forward.
We're gonna give a lot of tools.
Here's the way forward, because that's, I go to family office conferences, all family business, all these other things, and there's, you've got your stories of the happy people, and then you've got the kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down. Right. You've got the stories of the train wrecks, like, the Vanderbilts or the Bush family, where I think a journalist wrote a book, and the father was known as crazy and the son was known as lazy.
Right.
We don't want to we don't want to just create a spectacle and go, oh, that's so awful. I know if we're going to talk about something that's not working, then we're going to talk about solutions, because I'm always for that of, okay, life's unfair. Number one premise, deal with it. Life's unfair. And what are you going to do? Are you just going to sit back and be a statistic? And also, even if you've had train wrecks, if you have been that train wreck, then what are you going to do to turn it around? Because you're a train wreck once doesn't mean you're always going to be a train wreck. You don't have to do that.
And we're going to cover a lot of subjects that, if we do our job well and we have actually curious people that actually do want to learn, we're going to give the tools. We're going to give them the framework and the construct to view the headlines, to read the newspaper, to sift through the noise, understand that where you source your information and is important for you to understand what are they trying to sell you? What is their agenda? Are you clickbait for them to sell higher advertising rates? Are they just trying to sell you junk food and mobiles, or some pharmaceutical drug you don't need, or some, understand. First, you need to understand the information source and what's their agenda. That's why we spent so much time talking about our agenda here.
Right.
And so that agenda is being offered because we ain't selling anything. If anybody wants to understand what our own business lives are involved around, they may have to reach us individually. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that.
Yeah, no. For the record, I'll state Joe has angelspan.com. I've got High Net Worth Women Institute, highnetworthwomeninstitute.com. And if you want to look us up there, look us up on LinkedIn, feel free. We are not going to mention our businesses in a commercial way in this podcast at all. We may touch on what we do, or what we've learned from working with people, but this is in no way to promote our services. We are in absolute agreement about that.
You can trust our agenda, because trust is the single thing that people of means, of wealth, of accomplishment seek the most. You can trust us, and if you listen and are curious, we will be able to empower you to be a trustworthy person to other people of significant means it might be in your lives and or careers.
Yeah, the education, and one person that I know well, Linda Mack from Mack International, she was a private banker, and then she became a very high level family office recruiter, headhunter, whatever you want to call it. She said, always, I've asked for her wisdom as an ex-private banker. She said, clients need to understand, people of wealth need to understand, this advisor in front of me that I'm considering working with, or I am working with, You just simply have to, everyone's got an angle. It's fine. And, hey, the world goes around with buying and selling. That's fine. What do they get hired to do? What do they get rewarded for doing? What do they get fired for not doing?
That's
When you
three great
understand
questions.
that, that's like one of the first things I teach in my programs is, okay, and I do talk about, and it blows me away that nobody seems to talk about, how do you hire advisors? How do you find them, vet them, work with them, leave them if you have to? Sometimes you've just moved on. Sometimes you're not happy with them.
Yep.
This is so important. Everyone needs to, and there's no information on this, but those 3 simple questions, just understand where they're coming from.
Yep.
And what they're telling you. And the good ones will be honest. And we don't mean to say that, look out, all the thieves are behind the bushes waiting to jump out at you disguised as nice people. I'm so impressed with the people that go into family office and wealth management. They really care. The vast majority of them are wonderful, but you just do have to understand what's going on their side. And there's no substitute. Even with my clientele, we found that there's 2 camps. And you tell me, Joe, in your experience, there's people who are DIY. They want to get hands-on. They want to know. They want to know what this is and why they want to invest in this and what's good about that. And they want to be part of the decision making. And then you have the others who are kind of hands off, like, this isn't my thing. I don't really understand it. I'm not really interested in it, but I am aware I need to understand something. So tell me what I need to know. So they're a wealth team member instead of the CEO of their wealth team. That's fine too. I'm not advocating. At first I came out of, everyone needs to know. And like, Steffi, not everyone wants to know at this level.
Yeah.
If you've got people who are, it's just not their thing. They're doing other things. But I will say, if you don't have some understanding, that's where you're vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you asked some very profound questions, and I think we will probably cover these in more detail in other podcasts. But in the time spent running this multifamily office, I was always seeking to serve what I would identify through some of the very lens you're talking about. I would interview the clients. Because I didn't do it for money, I wasn't just trying to take every last client, and I was very careful of always raising our minimums until I could modulate the growth of the business with the staffing and the caliber of the clients. And it was always, I always characterize it as mature wealth or immature wealth. That's why I was using that phrase earlier, because it doesn't have to do with how long the money's been in the family. It doesn't have to do with how many zeros are behind their names on their balance sheet. It has to do with how their actions reflect their motivations. And the lens that I would view clients through is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and motivations. Right. And one of the examples I would give, and again, I haven't met the man briefly, but it's not hard to observe him and maybe draw some characterizations of his motivations. But Larry Ellison, right? He's worth $100 billion. And I have met him. Our old investment firm was anyway, doesn't matter.
Okay.
But Larry is still in that phase of life where it's ego gratification. Right? If you look at it in the Maslowian pyramid, it's ego gratification. Yet that example we gave earlier, that millionaire next door, was very quick to get into that self-actualize, the tip of the Maslowian hierarchy of needs and motivations. And again, people's behavior and actions, not the age of the money, not the dollar value of the money, not the age of the person, but there is a framework by which you can fairly accurately understand what is motivating somebody, what's their hot buttons. There is a gender lens, which I know we're going to have some fun with on future podcasts.
Yeah,
that also influence some of those choices and behaviors and motivations. There's also ethnic influences I've seen over time, which is fascinating,
and cultural.
And these are all part of the art of wealth, right? That influences the scientific approach to how you serve those people and or what's an optimized path for them to achieve their financial goals, which I freaking hate that phrase. But at the end of the day, what's going to help them, for me, help them become the best human they can be and have the resources they need to serve their motivations to be the best human they can be. Because not everybody is going to become a Nobel Prize winner. Not everybody's going to become Mother Teresa. Some people just are going to always be scraping by every day to live an economic life that looks like subsistence, but they themselves, their motivations, their choices, and how they interact with other human beings can look very aspirational, very self-actualizing. So they may look on the surface like they're towards the bottom of that Maslowian economic pyramid, but their actions are very aspirationally self-actualizing. And that's really should be the point. And this is sort of some of the principles that have influenced my choices and both life choices and the services and the advice, but also sort of what I want to hope to bring to these conversations in our audience is that there is a way to aspirationally be better, no matter who you are, where you're at. But with that comes a level of responsibility.
Yes, and I would like
you can't be lazy.
No, you can't. Well, and this is why it's like if you think money buys you some easy life, oh, I got news for you. It's a lot more complicated. If you want an easy life, just don't start accumulating money. And I love to bust this one. I catch people at this all the time. Money equals freedom. No, it does not. Stop that. That is putting money up on a pedestal and making it a god, and it is not. It is a neutral thing. It is a vehicle and a tool. That money is not freedom. And that concept is what keeps a lot of middle-class people middle-class and unhappy. Or even if you have gotten wealthy, yeah, the more money I get, the better it'll be. Like, no, money equals choice. And then I started working with an amazing woman named Lindsay Mustaine out of Seattle. She teaches people who are employees in the workforce how to get huge raises. And really, it's what she does is help them think differently about themselves as me Inc., not worker. But anyway, I won't go into that. But she said money equals freedom. I said, I'm gonna blow your mind. It doesn't. It equals choice. And then she said, and what we realized in talking together is actually, let's take money equals freedom of choice. Okay, now we're on to something. But here's the deal. And this is what I told her. You are free right now. You are always free. We are always free. There is nothing. I am free. I can make choices. I can do what I want. I can do anything. Money and freedom are two. Please separate those. They're two different things. You are always free.
Yeah.
Always. Even if you're in prison, you may not have your liberty, but you are free to think. And there's that amazing young man up at San Quentin whose nickname is Wall Street, got in there at 17 for murder, couldn't read, couldn't anything, and decided, well, these white folks are making money. Well, why can't I? And he's now teaching people in prison and outside of prison about investing because he started reading and if he can do it, anyone can. So freedom, money, not the same thing.
Yeah. There's again, that's why people have said, I'm sure you've heard it, I've heard it. You gotta write a book on this stuff because I'm
the writer here. I'm gonna do it. I'll write anything. Yeah,
there's so much richness and so much lessons that, again, people hear it but they don't want to believe it, and yet they'll so anyway, that's part of our aspirational goals. Is there anything that you want to sort of kind of bring this to a bow as sort of to set the tone and context for what we're hoping to accomplish and what you maybe specifically want to accomplish out of however long we can do this and seem to still be interested ourselves in doing it and or find an audience that actually cares about what we think on the subject?
No, I agree. We're talking about the art and science of wealth, but you don't have to be money wealthy at this minute to enjoy this and get something out of it. We're talking at levels for everyone to understand and learn from. And I between what Joe and I have each lived through and then who we know, I think it's going to be a completely unique space to talk in depth about issues that are rarely talked about, hear voices that aren't usually heard, and get different ideas to help people expand their knowledge and their horizons and come at this wealth thing, all the definitions of wealth from a completely different place. I'm really, really thrilled we're doing this. And I hope people will enjoy the journey with us.
Well, that's certainly the goal. And my goal personally is to, I really believe we're at a really important inflection point in Western civilization. I mean, that's just meta beyond just the numerical value of wealth or money or those sorts of things. I think we're at a really, really critical time. There's so many concurrent patterns and waves that are at a concurrent inflection point. Societal waves, if you study wave pattern analysis, long cycle waves and short cycle waves, cultural, financial, generational, even ethnic. There are so many things happening right now that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, Western civilization, Western Europe, the United States, Western civilization broadly defined is going to look so vastly different that we're at a massive inflection point. And it's important to get this right. Because yes, we have a younger generation that has been shown in many ways by their parents and grandparents what not to do to the environment, to money, to splashing your wealth around, but also just value systems and principles, first principles, or the lack thereof. And so I'm hoping to bring some of that study and conversation, yes, as it applies to art and science of wealth, but even define the definition of wealth in a little bit broader context than just dollars and cents. And how many commas you can get behind your name. And tactically, what's a hot investment today? Or should I buy which cryptocurrency do I want? I'm not sure I ever want to be involved in that level of conversation because that's so pedestrian, so short term. And it's really, frankly, not nearly as important or relevant as some of these larger cycle issues that frankly are more important to the true elements of wealth, the folks that do have lots of zeros behind their names. But most importantly, they can have, because the subtext of our title is having an impact and leaving a legacy. And those two words are really important to me. What impact do you want to have? Because frankly, I think once you've been blessed with excess resources, either through birth or through your own God-given skills and talents, or just gotten lucky and won the lottery, with that comes a responsibility. And I think there's been a whole bunch of folks that have abdicated that responsibility because modern consumerism has made it easy for them to do so, and in fact, incentivize them to do so. And the legacies that aren't being left, or those that are being left, should be embarrassing to a lot of people, and even a whole generation to a certain degree. And so that's sort of getting to the real meat and bone of what does impact and what does legacy mean, and really how should wealth be defined even more broadly, and then most importantly, how to manifest a wealthy life to have a big impact and to have a legacy that you and your kids and your grandkids can be proud of. That's my goal.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Art and Science of Wealth podcast, Having an Impact, Leaving a Legacy. Edited and produced by Nicholas Peck.